If only you knew how much it took for me to get on this camera. I've been trying to fix the camera, but now it is fixed and we can just talk. The memory card, battery, and everything else. The universe was trying not to let me sit down and film this video. But you know what? I'm sitting down. Let me look at the thing. The universe was trying to not have me film this video, but I sat down anyway. And I'm filming this video. Okay? Hey YouTube, it's your girl Stacy Celeste. Welcome to my channel. This video is going to be about my February reading wrap up. So for the month of February, I read 4 books, and one of them you already know because hopefully you've already seen my reading diaries on it, but we're gonna kind of go over it anyway. So without further ado, let's just hop right in because I'm hoping this video can be short. So the first book I read it on my Kindle, so I do not have the physical copy, but I will put it up here. I did talk about this book, I believe, in my January reading wrap up at the end, because I don't think I filmed that wrap up until February, so I'm pretty sure I had finished this book already, and that is Black Girls Must Die Exhausted by Jane Allen. So this book is essentially about a young lady, I think she's in her early 30s, and she works for the news in Los Angeles, and she's basically done everything pretty much right in her life. She went to college, she has a relationship, she has a great relationship with her friends, and she's, living alone, and she has money, and she's, really trying to climb up in her career, and things take a turn when she finds out that she doesn't have a huge window to have a child. So she has a low egg count and she needs to either freeze her eggs or have a kid very, very soon. And that leads her to kind of explore her relationship and see if that's something that she would want in that relationship. And then it also leads her to want to get a promotion at her job, even though she already wanted to get the promotion, but she really wants to get the promotion because the amount of money that it will cost her to freeze her eggs. And yeah, so it's basically goes through her life, and it basically talks about, some of the things that's going on with her friends, her relationship with her mother, her grandmother, her father. It's very much so just a contemporary book. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I thought it was a solid read. It was good. I kept coming back to it. It wasn't something that I felt the need to DNF, but the things about the book that really kind of just were annoying kind of cringy for me was just there was a lack of subtlety with the book when it came to the cultural references and things that, like police brutality. There were, that kind of was something with throughout the book. There were just a lot of cliches to me, and they were just not subtle. So it just, I don't know. What I'm finding as I'm reading, especially newer books, is that there are a lot more like pop culture references, but then there's also a lot more, references to some of the things that are happening with our society right now, especially when it comes to, blackness and, like I said, police brutality and things like that. And while I think it's really good to, talk about these things and that they're a part of the lives that we live, I get a little bit nervous that we are wrapping our identity as Black people up in the trauma. And I'm kind of towing the line there. I don't know how I feel, but I sometimes cringe when I read it so bluntly. I think for me, one of the things that I love, one of my favorite authors is Toni Morrison, and I think ultimately that time period in writing for me, one of the things that I love is that there was a subtlety. You could talk about the Black experience without being so abrupt and becoming so cliche. The story was just more evolved, and it was more dynamic. I felt like there's a more depth to the characters. And obviously I don't want to compare these two authors because there's different levels, and I don't think that was what Jane Allen was trying to do, is duplicate someone like that. But I think that for me, I sometimes want a lighter read, but I also, when I do read something that I feel like, is more contemporary, I also would like it to be more subtle and more creative with how they approach certain topics. So I did like this book. There are a couple other books in the series, and I probably will listen to them. The plot of the story is catchy, and I am interested to kind of see what happens. But overall, I think between this book, and I also kind of felt it in Before I Let Go, I'm realizing about myself that I like books that are a little bit more subtle when it comes to talking about some of the things that you experience, whether it be as a woman or as a Black person, or just in society in general. I wish there was a little bit more creativity on how those topics are approached. What do you guys think? Have you guys read Black Girls Must Die Exhausted? In the title, I think I mentioned it in the last video. I stayed away from this because of the title, because it's like, I don't want to be exhausted. and it does come out, you kind of can get a sense of what they were talking about, in the book. It kind of explains it a little bit. But as much as I like to speak and like to read about Blackness and about Black women in particular, and there's more to us than the trauma. There's more to us than the things that are people talk about. And I just hope that as I continue to read, that I can kind of read more stories that are more dynamic when you talk about especially Black women. This is a beautiful experience. It's a beautiful body to be in. It's a beautiful thing. And yes, there are a lot of things and a lot of implications to that, and there's a lot of things that we need to talk about to make our experiences a lot better. But there is something so magical, and I wouldn't say magical, but there's so much love rooted in just who you are in this being, and I just hope that I can, maybe highlight some books that kind of talk about us more broadly and not just sticking on some of these topics and like making them be so apparent and abrupt in these books. That's my experience. Let me know yours in the comments below. But yeah, that was the first book that I read this month. The second book that I read, you guys hop on over to my most recent reading diaries. It was the autobiography of Malcolm X, as told by Alex Haley. I did do a reading diary on this, and I really wanted to the thing that kind of irked me the most about this book was just his ideologies around women. So that video kind of touches on that a lot. The one thing I will say is that I want to make sure you guys understand this is a classic. I think this is something that should be read. There is a lot here. I feel like this is one of those books that can be a catalyst to what we do next. I think there's a lot to build upon with this book, but there are a lot of things that we have to make sure that we check and that we can maybe build some language around so that we don't do the same things again. I think I mentioned it in the video, is that there is an overarching problem with white supremacy that is, obviously talked about here, and we see it's throughout the world, but there are a lot of different power structures at play, and one of those is patriarchy. And the thing is that a lot of those systems are the power structure is very similar. And until we can really connect to the structure and the power and the language that's used to, keep people in bondage or keep your foot on other people's necks, until we can really tap into that, then we're going to continue to use that in different ways. So my biggest prayer for our community, for the Black community, for other communities, is that, other communities of color or marginalized communities, is that we can recognize how society and how these systems of power have, not been beneficial to us, but then that we can be creative about how we move forward so that we can truly dismantle all of these systems. Because unless we do all of them, I just don't think that we do any of them. So if you want to hear a little bit more about what I've said there, go back to that reading diary or watch the reading diary. And also, I think this is a topic that I want to kind of explore more. So I'm hoping to dive into some more books around that. Also wanted to give a real quick shout out to, I will put the comment up here. I forget your name, but there was I guess someone maybe subscribed to me, but who watched the Malcolm X video that I did, and also recommended that I read another book, which I found the book on Kindle, which I do not have up here. One second. It's Eloquent Rage, A Black Feminist Discovers Her Superpower by Brittany Cooper. I'll put that up here. She recommended that I read this book, and so I found it on Kindle. So I will be tapping into that book, along with the other book that I mentioned in that reading diaries, The Three Mothers, which is also on Kindle Unlimited. So I will be tapping into both of those books, if not next month, the month after. I want to get to them pretty quick, so I'll let you guys know what I think there. Also, if you guys have any other books that you think I should read with regards to, what I spoke about in that, or, as an additional book to read on top of the autobiography of Malcolm X, let me know in the comments. Any books, let me know in the comments. Please, please, please. I will do my best to get to them. And let me know what you think if you have a different opinion, or if you've read this book or any of the other books that I talk about and have a different opinion. Please put it in there. I want this space to be engaging. I want it to feel safe so that we can really have cool conversations. So with that being said, the third book that I read, I mentioned this in that January wrap up. I don't think I had finished it in the January wrap up, but I mentioned it as the book that I was going to tap into next. And you guys, I read this book. I finished this book. I love this book. This book is a 5-star read for me, even though I don't typically necessarily rate memoirs and autobiographies and stuff. This book to me is a must read. It is something that is in my soul. I feel so much. I feel like I'm a better person. I feel like I'm more insightful. I feel like I'm more compassionate. I feel just better because I read this book, y'all. So if you haven't guessed it, yes, it is Viola Davis's book, Finding Me. This book was impeccable. It was an excellent read. Viola Davis, the courage, the vulnerability that it took to write this book. She grew up amidst a lot of trauma and in utter poverty. And she had a bond with her sisters that was just so beautiful. I cried more than I've ever cried reading a book, reading this, particularly not so much at the trauma, but the overcoming, the resiliency, the perseverance, the mentality shift, the things that she had to deal with, but then get through. Just impeccable. I also cried apart with her father, because I'm a bit of a daddy's girl, and toward the end, she has, there's the lot that kind of happens there. She dealt with, abuse. She witnessed abuse in her childhood, but all of those things came together to make her the amazing actor that she is. I really loved a lot of the insight. I'm not an actor. I took drama in high school and I was not good at it. So that is a space in an area that I've not been in. I actually work more in the STEM business area. So I've not gotten into that place, but the way she explains Juilliard, and how she kind of was being forced into this classical box and what she needed to do in order to really embrace who she is and just become the actor that she needs to be. Like, she goes through a lot of that. She talks about what it looks like to be a working actor, and the reality of a working actor, and that it's not about fame. It's about having this passion to be on stage and to be able to portray different stories. Then she also talks about some of the roles that she played, including How to Get Away with Murder, which, y'all, that was my show. Thursdays, I would watch Grey's Anatomy, I would watch Scandal, and then I would watch How to Get Away with Murder. So, I was all in when she was talking about that. But she talked about how she's been able to really just bring herself to her characters and find who that character is and embody it, and how she kind of uses experiences that she's had in her life to do that. I talk a little bit more in depth about this book with my friend. Hold up, I'll be right back. All right, sorry about that. I had a package at the door. Me and my friend, we have a podcast. I'll put the little channel art there. It's called Wildflower, and we just talk about a lot of different things on there. And this book came up in the podcast because we both kind of read it. So if you guys want to hear a little bit more about that, you can check that podcast out. We will have a YouTube channel along with the podcast, but it's a fun podcast, and we kind of talk about this book as well. So if you want to tap into what I thought even more, go ahead. But I could talk about that book all day long. I highly recommend it to anybody. I always say, I have been saying that it's essentially an ode to Black women, especially dark-skinned, chocolate, beautiful, dark, melanated Black women who have not always had they had to find their way in the world and find who they are despite what society and everybody else is trying to tell them they are. So I just thought it was a very beautiful read, and I think part of what made it so emotional is that I was reading it right after I read this book, and it made it even more prominent of the stories and the Black experience that kind of wasn't, a part of some of these civil rights leaders, at least in my opinion. It wasn't necessarily in their, it was in their peripheral. They wasn't really focused on. And so I think it was great to read them back to back, but it was also extremely heavy to read both of these books back to back, which leads me to the last book that I completed last week for the month of February, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. So you can see I had 3 books, even the first book, that were more heavy, more about the social and societal difficulties of being Black in America. And then I go to England to get Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This book is a interracial romance by Talia is, a Black woman. So it fits Black History Month, right? It fits. But Chloe is a She's probably a 30 something, early 30s. She has chronic pain, fibromyalgia. And she is a very, very quirky character who overthinks things and is very weird and over the top sometimes, but she's super cute, and she is from a very, very wealthy family. And one day she almost loses her, let's say almost loses her life, but her life flashes before her eyes, and it makes her take a look at, hey, if I was to die today, what would my obituary say? Like, what would they say at my funeral? And then that makes her want to write this list, and it's basically a list to help her get her life. Part of that was to move out of her family home, which, like I said, she comes from a lot of money, so she's moving out of her family home and into an apartment. And in the apartment, she meets the superintendent, who is this guy here. His name is Red, and they seem very, very not in. They're like, her sisters, they recognize that Red is cute, but she's like, and they kind of clash a little bit. So there's a little bit of enemies to lovers, but they spend a lot more of the book being lovers than enemies, I will say. So essentially, they get into an entanglement because Red is eventually going to help her get her list and get her life. And yeah, it was overall just a super duper cute book. There's really not too many trigger warnings unless you are maybe triggered by pain and, chronic illness and things like that. It was, like I said, very cute. I thought that the romance was, I liked it because sometimes in romance books, people do stupid stuff. And I'm just like, okay, ain't nobody doing all that, but I think when it got to the point where, hey, there was going to be a miscommunication, that the way that the miscommunication was resolved was kind of more realistic for me. So I enjoyed that piece of it. I listened to this book on audiobook. Oh, that's another thing real quick. The audiobook here is excellent. So I forgot to mention that, but back to this one. I read this on audiobook, but I did also read it too, but I also listened to it on audiobook. And the thing that bothered me was that there was one person doing the voices, and she did Chloe very well, the narrator very well, but she did not do men's voices very well at all. And Red's voice, it just was very creepy hearing them, especially during the sex scenes that were in here. It just was very creepy for me. I didn't like that. It was not at all giving at all. I could not. But other than that, it was a good read. It was definitely something that I needed in order to kind of cleanse my palate a little bit from a lot of the weight from the other reads. So I think I ended up rating this 3 stars. It's good. This is kind of like Black Girls Must Die Exhausted. This has two additional books in this series, and it's basically following, this is Chloe Brown, and then she has 2 sisters. She has Eve and I think Danny, and I think each one of them have a separate book. So we'll see. If I do get those, I will probably listen to them via audiobook, because I like to listen to books that are lighter and don't necessarily require me to really be super intellectual. And that's kind of what these are. So if you're looking for something that's fun, a palate cleanser, if you like romance, this is definitely a romance. With romance, what you'll find is that I'm not huge on the actual, the sex scenes and stuff. I don't necessarily like to read too much sex scenes, and this was a little, it kind of crossed the line a little bit for me, because it was just the language and them talking and being flirty, and it was just kind of gag, especially with the guy. But I think overall the guy's narrator, the narrator voice, it just made it very awkward. But I think overall it was definitely a good read for me to kind of cleanse my palate. So 3 stars. recommend it for the reasons that I said. And yeah, that is all that I read for February. And what I have already started for, I've started several books. So one book, I have it here, but I don't have the book jacket. I'll put the book jacket up here, and that's Project 1619, or the 1619 project. I am about, let's see where I'm at here. Not quite halfway through this book, but I've read almost 200 pages, I believe. Not quite, but almost 200 pages. So I don't think I'll finish this next month. I'll probably just kind of bite at it over the course of a few months. So I probably won't finish this till maybe spring or summertime. But that is one book that I'm in the process of. And then the other book, which I'm reading and I plan to focus on reading, is, where is the book at? It's this. It is Blood Mark. So this is another palette cleanse for me. This is a fantasy. I read the first one, and that was Legendborn. And I just started this one. I don't even know if I'm 50 pages into it. I'm very, very new to it. So my goal reading wise is just to focus on this book and get through it. It's definitely something different and something new and something fun than what I read last month. This month my focus is just to kind of really have fun reading, because I found myself, at least this past weekend, being getting a little anxious about books. And I don't want that to be this at all. Books are fun. Books are escape for me from the day job. All right, so I will say that I'm going to try my best to continue to be consistent and try to get you guys at least one video a week. Tomorrow is my first day on my new job. It's still with the same company. I did get on the computer today and do some work, but it's a different job. And so when I start new roles, all right, so sorry for that, but when I start new roles, I'm usually like kind of dived in, so I can kind of, decrease the learning curve. Like that's my biggest thing. I want to decrease the learning curve and try to get to where I'm right here fast. So I got a feeling March is going to be one of those months that require me to really dive in and put a lot of energy and effort into my day job. But I don't want that to affect this. I don't want to affect, some of the other projects that I'm working on outside of even this channel. So I am very much so committed to trying to keep it up. But if you don't hear from me, it's not that I'm going away. It's just that I am kind of in another world. And that is also why I'm probably going to be more on the lighter side with the books, just to kind of give me an escape. So I feel like if I'm stressed out at work, at least I could kind of decompress versus pick up something like this and be stressed out. So anyways, I can't wait to let you guys know what I think of this book, and then also get creative about whatever that next video is going to be. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys in our next video. Peace out. Bye guys.